Alright, what's up everyone, I'm Floki, and today we're going to be taking a look at my top 3 Seahawks players with the most to prove in the 2021 NFL season. Now, with a lot of players on the roster that are not guaranteed to be with the team after this year, there are definitely some players that have some things to prove because obviously you want to get that next contract with the team. You want to prove to the team that you're worth staying as a starter, as a player that really can have an impact with the team. And with these top 3 guys, I kind of put them in order of who I believe has the most to prove to who has kind of got to prove something. And now to get right into it, my number 1 player that has the most to prove in this 2021 NFL season, you guys can probably guess, it's Ethan Pocic. Ethan Pocic is definitely in a weird space right now. He is definitely the best center we have on the team. He's not very old. He's 27. He'll be 28 after this year, going into another contract year. The Seahawks signed him back to a 1-year deal, kind of because they had to. They have no other replacements. And we did pass on Creed Humphreys, Ken Miners, Josh Myers. We passed on a lot of really good guys in the draft this year to get Dwayne Eskridge. I still like the pick, but we did pass on a lot of guys. You can't really say we didn't. So Ethan Pocic, 1, has to prove the Seahawks right for not drafting a center in the 2021 NFL draft, and 2, he wants to earn another contract. The Seattle Seahawks need a center. He'll probably stay on the team for as long as the Seahawks don't have a replacement for him, but he needs to play well or else the Seahawks are probably going to try and find a replacement sooner rather than later. Ethan Pocic isn't the best center whatsoever. He is not the worst whatsoever. So he's kind of in that weird middle ground where he's probably replaceable, but not super easily replaceable. So the Seahawks kind of have to have him. So in my opinion, Ethan Pocic, he definitely does have to prove himself to get that next contract, but really, I think he is relatively safe. And the second player that has the most to prove really isn't a player at all. It's an entire position group, and that's the corner group for the Seattle Seahawks. Unless the Seahawks go and sign Richard Sherman or go and trade for Stephon Gilmore, the Seahawks are having a really big risk when it comes to the corner spot. They put a lot of money and a lot of attention into the defensive line, into the pass rush to try and ease off on the pressure that the corners would have to actually play coverage, and they went for a lot of young guys that are kind of inexperienced, definitely need to prove themselves. And when you look at it, you have Ahkello Witherspoon, who can be really, really good, but he has to prove that he can be at the top of his game. He's dealt with some injuries, he's had some issues, but now that he's healthy going into the season, can he stay healthy? Can he play well? We have some other guys that are going into contract years. We have DJ Reed, who played really well last year in the second half of the year, so can he continue to play that well? Can he be a long-term guy for the Seahawks? Trey Flowers is another guy whose contract is ending after this year, and he really hasn't been able to fully prove himself as a corner that the Seahawks can rely on for a long time. He's getting up there in age. It's not looking great for him. He has a lot to prove if he wants to try and stay on this team. Ugo Amadi and Marquise Blair are 2 guys whose contracts end after next year. They have a lot to prove in the secondary. I guess you could say Quandre Diggs somewhat has something to prove because his contract does end this year as well. Maybe Marquise Blair can come in and take his spot. I mean, there are a lot of guys in the secondary whose contracts end after this year or the next year. So these next 2 years for the Seahawks secondary is going to be very interesting because if this risk can pay off for the Seattle Seahawks, where all these guys, Ahkello Witherspoon, DJ Reed, showed to be really good. You get Trey Brown doing well. Ugo Amadi continues to play well in the slot. I mean, you can have a very, very young, talented group for the Seahawks that can be the corners for a long time for them if this risk does work out. But of course, it is a risk, so it possibly might not work, and maybe we just have one of the worst secondaries in the league. Our corners can't cover anybody. They're just consistently inconsistent, and they really don't show anything, and it just hurts the team as a whole. I mean, this is definitely a very interesting situation. I am going to be watching the defense for the Seattle Seahawks very intently, especially the corners, because the Seahawks obviously show that they want to try and get a good young corner group, and they can. They have a lot of really good players that can be really solid, and they put a lot of attention into the defensive line so that we can hopefully get pressure on the quarterback so that we don't have that much pressure on these young corners that still kind of need to prove themselves. But Ahkello Witherspoon, Trey Flowers, they kind of got to prove themselves. DJ Reed, he proved himself a lot last year. He's going to be 27 if we offer him a contract after this year. I think he's probably going to get another contract from the Seahawks. That was an absolutely stellar pickup from the 49ers that the Seahawks made. I mean, we've picked up some good guys from the 49ers, from the Ahkello Witherspoon. If he can play well, I'd love to have him back on a 2-3 year deal after this year. DJ Reed being 26, going to be 27, 3-4 year deal, I'd be absolutely okay with that. I mean, there's a lot of guys in our secondary whose contract ends after this year or the year after. Like I said, they got to prove a lot, but it is going to be really fun to watch them being so young and athletic. And now the third and final player that I believe has the most to prove for the Seattle Seahawks in the 2021 NFL season is once again not a player. It is a collective. It is Rashad Penny and Chris Carson. The Seahawks definitely have some really solid running backs on their roster, but they all kind of have something to prove, because running back is one of those positions where you really don't get those long-term contracts. You don't get the big money contracts unless you're top tier running back, and Rashad Penny can't really say that he is a top tier running back. He's had injury issues. He's had flashes of really great plays. He's had some really bad games. I mean, he's kind of all over the place right now, and his contract ends after this year. Will he be able to get another contract from the Seattle Seahawks? I personally don't think he will, unless something absolutely crazy happens, because Chris Carson did just get a 2-year deal with a lot of money that is pushed after his deal is over to try and help with the cap numbers. But Chris Carson, he will be on the team for 2 more years, and I also believe he has something to prove, because as another running back, after these 2 years are up, will he be staying with the team? Will he get to another team? I mean, a running back is a very weird position. There's a lot of running backs that come into the draft that are probably capable, that don't really go noticed too well, and they could probably come in and do well enough on any team. DJ Dallas came in. He wasn't really that great when Chris Carson and Rashad Penny was hurt, but he played okay enough, and with some growth, he probably could do better. And I mean, there's a bunch of running backs in this draft that probably could have been drafted and taken Chris Carson's spot, but the Seahawks didn't want to take that risk. They wanted to stay good. They want to win now, so they don't really want to take that chance with a running back. But if Chris Carson can't really prove himself as a top tier running back, everyone knows he's really solid, but does he deserve another contract after this 2 years is up? He has to prove that he can be a top tier guy that can get another contract. Rashad Penny has to prove that he can be close to a top tier guy so that he gives the Seahawks a reason to sign him back after this year, because running back is a position where you always have to prove yourself. You're never really safe as a running back, because running backs are so expendable, and it really sucks for them because they have such a high toll on their body. They get hit basically every single play. They're really just thrown into a horrible situation just running between like 15 big men. Running backs are not put in the best position to have great longevity when it comes to their careers, but if they can prove themselves, they can make some big money. And Chris Carson, he got a pretty decent payday, but it's only for 2 years. What will happen after those 2 years? Rashad Penny, he got his rookie deal, but will he be able to prove that he's good enough to stay with the Seahawks, or will he go be a career backup for some teams? I mean, there's a lot to prove with these two guys, but Chris Carson, I believe these next 2 years will be very important for him in his future, seeing if he's going to get another contract with the Seahawks, go to another team, see if he'll be able to stay a starter or he gets replaced. Rashad Penny, he's got to prove a lot this year, but he's probably not going to be starting, so it's going to be difficult for him to do so. So those are my 3 players, or 3, I guess, groups more or less, that I think have the most to prove. Ethan Posich, I think he has to prove a lot if he wants to stay as a solid long-term center for the Seattle Seahawks. When it comes to his age, he's in a decent spot right now. He has a lot to prove. He can get a lot better, and if he does get better in the pass blocking, in the run blocking, then he could be a long-term guy for the Seattle Seahawks. The corners have a lot to prove. The Seahawks are taking a big risk right now, putting a lot on the pass rush, letting these young, inexperienced corners go out and hopefully do well enough. If they can prove themselves to be a young corner group that the Seahawks can kind of stay together for a long time and continue to build up, that'd be absolutely amazing. I would love to have something like that, but it really is a risk for the Seahawks. They are taking a big risk with these young, inexperienced guys. And then you have Rashad Penny, Chris Carson. It's just the running backs as a whole, another group. You got to prove yourself as a running back. Are you going to get that next contract? Even Chris Carson just got a 2-year deal, but what will happen after those 2 years? He's got to do a lot this season and next season. So those are my guys that I think have the most to prove. Let me know down below in the comments what you think about this list and any other players that you think have a lot to prove going into next season. There are probably some other guys that you could look at that have a lot to prove. I think tight ends, even though Will Dissly and Gerald Everett are both going to have their contracts end after this season, will they get re-signed? Will they get extended? Who knows? I don't really think they have that much to prove, because we know who Will Dissly is. We know he can catch passes, he can make plays. Gerald Everett, he got signed to a 1-year deal, but we kind of know who he is. He's a really good tight end, so I don't think they have too much to prove, but obviously, you know, they're looking for another contract. They got to at least play well. There's also some other guys that probably are on the defensive line, something like that, that can probably have something to prove, but like I said, let me know down below in the comments who you think has the most to prove, if it's not any of the guys that I mentioned. And what do you think about my list? Like I said, leave it down below in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. And with that, I'd like to thank you for watching. Have a great day.